He found sexy lingerie in my suitcase after I came home from a business trip. Now I'm divorced. This is probably the hardest thing I've ever had to write, but I need some advice or some support. Anything, really. I've lost everything, and it was never supposed to be this way. I had everything I could have ever wanted: a kind, loyal man who loved me with all he had. We had a beautiful life together, a home we'd built on trust, dreams of starting a family someday, and a love and connection that felt so strong to the point that I thought it would always be unbreakable. And yet, here I am, having destroyed it all because of one reckless, selfish decision. My husband and I were married for 5 years, 5 good years. He was my best friend, my rock, and the one who always had my back. My work involves a lot of traveling, so I traveled a lot for work, but we had built trust and understanding over the years, and we never had to fight over unnecessary things. To be honest, I still don't fully understand why I did it, why I threw away everything I had with my husband. If you ask me for a reason, I'd probably tell you it was because he'd been so caught up with work. There was something between us, like an invincible chasm, that was so wide, it was virtually as wide as a galaxy. And the terrible thing about this great wife chasm was that neither of us have acknowledged its existence. I can't even remember if we knew that it was there and chose to ignore it, or if we had no clue whatsoever that such a great rift had formed in our lives. We'd been so busy with work, with life, that we hardly had any real time for each other anymore. Our conversations were mostly about day-to-day stuff like bills, errands, things to fix around the house. That deep connection we used to have just wasn't there anymore. And for months, it felt like he was not really there, like I was alone in our home, especially when I was not really traveling. So whenever I wasn't going on some business trip, he'd come home late and was all exhausted, and I felt invisible, just like my desires. Yes, I should have talked to him about it, but I didn't. That was my first mistake. And if you're all honest, that's a mistake most of you make in your marriages too. You bury your passion and let it build up into contempt. So please don't judge me. Anyways, this mess all started with one stupid business trip. The business trip was supposed to be simple. Just a few days out of town for work. I'd done it so many times before, and it was like me breathing air. So effortless and without stress. But little did I know that it wasn't going to be that way this time. I packed my suitcase, kissed him goodbye, and left. By the time I boarded that plane, I was already feeling lost, like something important was slipping away. Work has always been my escape. It was a place where I felt in control when everything else seemed to be falling apart. But in my hotel room each night, I'd feel this emptiness that I couldn't shake off. I thought about calling my husband, but I didn't because he was no longer what I craved for. He couldn't fill that void. He had no time, and he was most definitely working at that time. At least that's what I told myself. And instead of opening up to my husband about how I feel, I looked for distractions, something that could fill up the void that was inside me, something that could make me whole again, that could make me feel human, feel alive, feel like a woman. One night I had a chance to fill that void. We had a group hangout, and it was supposed to be casual dinner with a few drinks, just a way to unwind. But as the night went on, people started leaving, until only a few of us were left. We found a crowded and loud bar, and the noise made it easy for me to lose myself. There was this coworker, a guy I'd known for years. We'd always been friendly, but nothing more. Yet that night, after a few drinks, something shifted. I knew, even then, that I should have left, gone back to my room alone. But there was this strange thrill, this feeling of being wanted that I hadn't felt in so long. It sounds so selfish and shallow when I say it now, but at that moment, it felt like everything, and I was starved for it. I thirsted for it. It felt like the only thing that could keep me alive, like oxygen in space. But it wasn't just that. Other than the necessity I felt, I wanted to feel seen, valued like I mattered. It sounds and tastes sour, but it is the truth. And I let myself enjoy that feeling, even though, deep down, I knew it was wrong. We talked about things I hadn't talked about with my husband in ages. He listened, really listened, and that felt good. The attention felt like a balm on an open wound. And by the time we left the bar, I was torn between staying and leaving. I told myself I'd say goodnight at the elevator, that I'd go back to my room and forget this urge scratching at the back of my mind and just beneath my abdomen. But the urge soon won, because we ended up in his room instead, and it all happened so fast. A part of me was watching it happening while knowing that I was making the worst choice of my life. Yet I couldn't stop. It felt amazing, like a cold fire had lit inside me. The next morning, the guilt hit me like a ton of bricks. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back. All I could think about was my husband, how much he trusted me, and how much I'd let him down. There was no way to undo what I'd done, no way to make it right. So I buried it and told myself I'd never let it happen again. I pretended that it hadn't happened. I mean, what better way to tell a lie than to convince yourself of that lie first? But the guilt was growing heavier every second, and when I finally got home, I could hardly look my husband in the eye. I tried to act normal, but everything felt wrong. Every small thing he did for me just reminded me of what I'd ruined. You know how one thing leads to another? It happened to me, and before I knew it, I'd crossed a line I could never uncross. I know I told myself I'd never do it again, but it just happened. I got an impromptu call to handle an emergency, and I had to take a last-minute flight out of the state. I remember when I got the call, and my boss asked me to pick a partner to assist me in handling the emergency. I know I could have gone with anyone else, and by right, I should have. Like I said, I had told myself it wouldn't happen again. It was a promise I made to myself, but for some reason, I could not control my tongue as I picked the specific coworker that I had an affair with. He was an effective worker, so of course it wouldn't raise any suspicions that he was my top pick. And my God, you should have seen how we handled the issue, like a well-oiled machine. We were unstoppable, and it was the same when we slept with each other that night. I couldn't stop. The pleasure of that night was so intoxicating that I couldn't think of anything else. I just wanted more of it, more of him. And as much as I didn't want to admit it, I wanted more of it with my coworker, not my husband. After that, my business trips were heightened. More often, it became more and more frequent, and I barely had any breaks. To be honest, my work was now my life, and it was my life that was like my work. The unholy switch. I told my husband how my work was more demanding and stressful now, and he comforted me and told me I could take a work break if I wanted to, and that he was always here to support me, no matter the decision I made. But I told him that I couldn't. and he shouldn't worry about me. How could I take a break when I had something good ongoing during my work trips that I never wanted to miss out on? And the reason I even told him my work was demanding was because I didn't want to give him a chance to suspect anything. So that was my way of covering it. One night when my coworker had turned into something more intense, something I live for. It didn't matter whether I went on a business trip or a day trip with my coworker, because my work has to do with traveling. So my husband never noticed or suspected anything. But how could he when he loved me so much and would do anything for me? Even when we barely had intimate moments, I knew my husband loved me. He was the sweetest man ever and still is. And that's why I was still married to him then. I think my husband started feeling my absence more like he became the ghost in marriage. And for the first time in a while, when I returned one night, he had prepared something simple yet grand to welcome me back. This was unexpected, though. I was expecting my husband to be wrapped up in his own world, like always. But when I walked in, there he was standing by the dining table and grinning like a kid who just learned a magic trick. At first, I didn't know what to say. My stomach twisted, but partly because I just eaten out with my said coworker, and partly because I could see the effort he'd put in. Yet somehow I just wasn't in the mood for it. I felt this odd wave of irritation, like I couldn't match his energy, and his attempt at romance felt like a strange scene from a movie I wasn't prepared to play. I told him I needed a shower first, and with that, I escaped for like 30 minutes into the bathroom, where I wished he didn't do what he did. I didn't want him to feel like I didn't love him, because I do. I just had a lot going on in my life at that point, and I was not ready for anything of that. After he patiently waited for me to come out and I didn't, he told me the food would get cold, so I had no choice but to come. He looked at me with that warmth in his eyes and pulled a chair and kept talking about how much he'd missed me and how he wanted tonight to be special. And also how he was so sorry about us not spending much time ago. And for me, working so hard. So he just needed to do something to appreciate me and to make me feel seen. But I didn't want to be seen anymore by him. I had someone else who made me more visible and appreciated. So I forced a smile and sat down and tried to keep up. But every bite tasted somehow, let's say bitter, just like the moment, and his words felt like noise to my ears. I just wanted to skip the whole thing and go to bed. It was like I was going through the motions, nodding and murmuring things I didn't fully mean, and at the same time, feeling guilty that I was faking it. The real weight of it hit when we finished eating, and he reached out and took my hand, then led me to our bedroom with that look in his eyes. He'd put soft music on and dimmed the lights and was saying all these little sweet things, trying to make me feel loved. But I felt like I was 1,000 miles away, detached, and was unable to let myself feel any of it. His touch, his words, they all felt foreign to me. None of it could reach me. I realized my body didn't want him anymore, and it could no longer recognize the man I was married to. I felt bad for him, but there was nothing I could do. We tried, but every move just felt awkward. It was like I was going through steps, but feeling nothing. Like I was stuck in a moment where I was supposed to feel close to him, but only felt empty. And the worst part was seeing his face, the confusion and the disappointment. He was trying so hard to connect, but I was already too far gone and too tangled up in my own mess and in my own guilt and my own restless thoughts. I told him I was tired and that I am sorry, that I was just tired, that maybe we should try again another night. He understood and said the last thing he wanted was to stress me more or make me feel uncomfortable, so we went to sleep peacefully. That night left a mark on me. It should have been a wake-up call, given how much he cared and how much he wanted us to work. But instead, all I could think about was how I didn't know I could find my way back and how I was okay having a good time with my coworker and how I just wanted my husband to keep being my husband and nothing more. I know this is what I've wanted, to always be seen and recognized by my husband, but I was far too gone and there was no coming back from the mess I have made. I kept consoling myself with the words that no one relationship was perfect, and not even people in it, so I wouldn't feel like the worst person on earth. So I kept going back to my coworker, and this kept happening, and I was too busy to notice how this was pushing me further away from my husband or how negatively it was affecting him. Or maybe I noticed and I was too selfish to care. So this went on, and each time that my husband tried to touch me, I felt irritated, and sometimes I would get angry and shout at him for not being understanding, that I was tired, and he was still trying to touch me without considering how stressful I was. He'd apologized. The tension between my husband and me became a bitter routine that somehow settled into our everyday life. He tried to touch me, to kiss me, to draw me into some moment of intimacy, but all I could feel was exhaustion and a kind of irritation I didn't want to admit. I'd pull back and make some excuse about being tired or stressed from work, and his face would fall, but he'd try again. And this time, in a more gentle and more understanding way. Still, we'd end up fighting, and I raised my voice, and each of us would be frustrated for our own reasons. I'd snap, telling him he wasn't understanding enough, and that he didn't know how hard my job had become or how much I had on my shoulders. He'd counter that all he wanted was to spend time with me and that he missed the closeness we used to have and the warmth that had once filled our marriage. I'd respond by raising my voice even louder, and by then, the shouting would start. I don't even know where it all came from. The irritation, the anger, the impatience. I just couldn't seem to bridge the gap, and it felt easier to blame him than to look at what was really happening. And he'd take it all. He'd let me go off on him, and he never shouted back with the same energy, and always somehow met my anger with calm. It infuriated me sometimes, that patience he had, as if he could see past my walls, as if he still loved me when I couldn't even love myself. When my anger would start to fade and was replaced by guilt and shame, I'd often end up in tears. I'd sit there crying and apologizing, saying I didn't mean to take it out on him, and he'd hold me, tell me it was okay, that he understood. But somehow, despite his understanding, we ended up in the same place over and over. It was as if we'd unknowingly created this cycle where each evening ended in frustration or silence. I'd come home feeling exhausted from work, messing around with my coworker, already half dreading the inevitable misunderstanding or clash. I'm sure he dreaded it too, but he never showed it. He'd greet me warmly and offer to take my bag, asking how my day was. Like he still believed in the chance to turn things around. But no matter how hard he tried to connect, I found myself pulling away. It wasn't always intentional. I would start out good, but then drift away into something bad. It was like a fog that clouded everything else, and no matter how much I wanted to shake it off, I couldn't. My husband would try everything. He would even make dinner or suggest we sit and talk for a bit, but even the small things felt overwhelming to me. I knew he noticed my distance. He never said it outright, but I could feel his frustration and hurt in the way his face would fall when I pulled away from his touch or when I answered his questions with a vague, distracted response. The worst part was, I could see he was trying so hard to keep us connected. He'd go out of his way to make me comfortable, to show he cared. When I'd come home late, worn out and irritable, he'd have a meal waiting, or he'd make tea, hoping it might help me relax. He even began to help with the small things, like putting my clothes away and tidying up my mess of work papers and folders that I carried home every night. I never asked him to, but he'd take care of it so I won't have to worry about it. And then he'd come over and put his hands on my shoulders and gently massage me. Sometimes he'd say nothing and just focus on the knots in my back and the tightness in my neck and worked out every ache with such careful attention. But I was so wrapped up in my own frustration and in my own exhaustion that I didn't let myself feel the care he was putting into each touch. I didn't let myself be grateful. I could feel his love in every gentle press of his fingers and in the way he didn't complain, even when he was exhausted too. He'd stay with me and stroke my hair as I drifted off, whispering soft things about how much he loved me. But even then, I never could let myself enjoy the moment, but I was always holding back and never fully allowing myself to feel the depth of what he was offering. Every night, he'd come to me with those small acts of love, hoping that one day I'd see it, that one day I'd stop pulling away. The hardest part is, I knew he was hurting. He did everything he could to support me, to be there for me, even when I shut him out. And the more he tried, the more I felt this ache inside, like I was failing him in ways I didn't fully understand. When I think about it now, I realize he was trying to save us in every way he knew how. He was doing everything I'd once hoped he would, everything I'd once wanted. But I was so wrapped up in my own anger, my own resentment, that I couldn't see it. I didn't let myself see it. And now, looking back, I see that he was holding our marriage together with every small, quiet act of love, even as I pulled further and further away. Now, this is where it all went wrong, and it was all due to my carelessness. One night, I came home from a business trip, exhausted and ready to drop. My husband had gotten used to our little routine. He'd meet me, take my suitcase, help me settle back in. I was running on fumes and I was barely thinking. I just wanted to crash and sleep, maybe even get over this welcoming part. But he, as usual, took care of things by helping me unpack and putting everything back in its place, like he always did. I barely registered what was happening until I noticed he'd gone quiet. When I turned to look, he was holding something up, something small, lacy, and bright red. My heart nearly stopped. It was the lingerie, the one that I never meant for him to see. But there it was, right in his hands, like a neon sign flashing every mistake I just made. He looked at me with a question in his eyes that didn't even need words. Still, he asked, "What's this?" I can still remember how his voice was even, but I could feel the tremor beneath it. and the hurt was already creeping in. I panicked. The first thing out of my mouth was a lie. I bought it for you. Even as I said it, I could feel how hollow it sounded, and I knew he could too. He kept looking at me and waiting for something real, and in that silence, the guilt hit me hard. The truth, the memories of wearing that sexy lingerie, it all came crashing down like a wave I've been trying so hard to hold back. The lingerie wasn't meant for him. It was a gift from my coworker, from a trip that wasn't really a business trip at all. It had been a getaway with him, a vacation disguised as work, and that's how most of my work trip has been since I started living that life of a cheater. And I remembered every detail and every choice that led me to wear that exact lingerie to spend those days with someone else. And here I was lying to the one person who trusted me completely. He told me I was lying, that this looked like it had been worn. I thought quickly and told him that I had tried it on to see how it looked. And maybe in the past, that lie would have sufficed, given the trust and bond we had. But that wasn't the case now. And so I could see that my lies weren't being believed. He warned me not to lie to him, and I nearly fainted. I had been caught. What could be worse? My own husband didn't believe a word I was saying. At that point, my brain began grappling for any rope it could catch in an effort to save me. But every single rope I caught just loosened easily. The next thing I knew, my lips weren't moving. I tried to explain, but the words stuck, so I apologized instead. And even though I felt like it wasn't enough, he just looked at me, and the hurt was now obvious in his eyes. He asked me how long it has been, a simple, direct question, and somehow it cut deeper than if he'd yelled or demanded answers. There was no hiding from it anymore. No excuse I could make would take that look off his face. "I'm so sorry," I said again. I kept apologizing and saying things like, "I never meant to hurt you." And that was the truth. I never wanted to hurt. But he was already pulling away, and his expression was hardening. It was like he was trying to build a wall against the pain. The reality was sinking in for both of us. He looked at me like he'd never seen me before, like I was a stranger, like everything we'd been through together was just wiped out. His voice was low, controlled, but I could feel the anger and pain churning underneath. He told me to keep my apologies as he shook his head, and that he doesn't want to hear the story or details behind it, and there was nothing I would say that would change what I did. I know that, but it didn't stop me from trying to speak, to say anything that might make a difference, but he didn't let me. His voice broke as he said that all this time has been putting himself out there and feeling like he was failing me somehow, like he was a bad husband, and I just let him believe that while I'd already replaced me. His words hit like a punch, and I couldn't breathe. The guilt, the shame, everything I'd been pushing down came rushing up to the surface. I felt worse as he continued speaking about how I made him feel like he was nothing. And he said, he can't do our marriage anymore. Not with me, not anymore. Then he left. Just like that. He grabbed his jacket, he didn't even look back, and walked out the door. I stood there alone in the silence as he left, and I couldn't even cry. It felt unreal, like everything around me was tilting. I reached out, tried to call him, texted him over and over, but there was no answer. The hours turned into days, and every single moment without him felt like another stab of pain. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I kept replaying it all in my head and trying to imagine a way out, a way to fix what I'd broken. Then, after days of nothing, he came back. For one brief second, I thought there might be a chance, a small hope that we could talk and he would forgive me, and that I could find a way to make him see how much I loved him despite everything. But he was calm, too calm, and in his hands he held papers, divorce papers. I'd known it was coming, maybe even expected it, but seeing the reality there in front of me, it felt like a hard kick in the stomach. I tried to argue. I tried to tell him how sorry I was, that I loved him, and that it was a mistake I'd regret for the rest of my life. I begged him to reconsider and to give us one more chance. He didn't waver. He said he was not going to be the man who stays with someone who doesn't love him. But I love him, and I still do. My heart was breaking right in front of him, but I could see that he was done. He'd closed himself off completely. He threatened to ruin my reputation if I didn't. And in the end, I signed. I was scared of his rage. I had no other choice. And just like that, it was over. I am divorced, currently as I am typing. Now every day feels empty, like a slow bleed. Every morning, I wake up hoping this was just a nightmare, but reality settles in, heavy and cold. I keep thinking about the life we had, the life I threw away, and I wonder, over and over, if there's a way back. If maybe one day, he'll see that I've changed, that I'd do anything to make it right. But the truth is, I don't know if he'll ever be able to look at me again without seeing the betrayal. Every day, I carry the burdens of what I did. There's this ache in my chest, this gnawing emptiness that feels like it'll never go away. I've tried to move on, to find something to distract me, but nothing fills the void. I miss him, miss us more than I ever thought possible. I'd do anything to go back, to change what happened. I can't picture my future without him, but I know I hurt him too deeply for him to trust me again. Is there a way back from this? Can two people rebuild when trust is shattered this badly? Right now, I don't know. All I know is that losing him has left me feeling like half a person, and every single day feels like my life is on autopilot, and I keep wondering if I'll ever feel whole again. Update. I've always envisioned my life to be beyond what I had and not beneath it. I never got to have a family with my ex-husband like I had imagined. I missed out on everything, and now the void I am looking forward to filling has nothing to do with intimacy again. It's more of like I'm searching for a purpose on earth because my life feels meaningless every day without him. Anyways, I want to thank everyone for their comments and support. I've read through them, and some of you are blaming me for what happened. Most of you stated I don't have the right to ask my husband for forgiveness or for him to take me back because I brought this on myself. Trust me, I know. I've blamed myself 1,000 times more than you could ever imagine. I regret everything, every single moment that led to this. Some of you asked about my coworker and why I didn't go back to him since I was always craving for him. It's true what they say. People often want what they don't have. The thing about people is that they want something they can't fully have, and when they have it, they no longer see the need for it. And that's what happened between me and my coworker. He was drawn to the thrill of it and the excitement of me sneaking around with him and lying to my husband. But now that it's over, and I realize it was a mistake, and he was just using me, and he never meant all those words he said to me during our moment together, I lost my husband, and in the process, I lost myself. My coworker moved on and found someone else. He said it's time for him to settle down, and honestly, I can't blame him. After what I did, who would want to be with me? I feel so damaged. I've hurt the one person who truly loved me, and I can't take that back. I'm angry, so angry at myself, at the choices I made, and at the life I've destroyed. Life after divorce is not easy. It's a constant struggle between moving on and holding on. I don't know how to let go of the guilt, the shame, and the memories of what we had, but I know I have to try. But how long will I continue like this? Every day I wake up to a failed hope that things will get better, but it never does. And I just keep feeling worse and worse again. I never knew how lonely I would be without my husband. I always detested cheaters, and now I am one of them. I never imagined this is the position I'd be in. I feel like a shadow of myself every day. I keep questioning my identity and self-worth. I keep telling myself I am not a cheater and that I just made a grave mistake because I need to comfort myself to see each day. And the toughest part is, it doesn't get better, and every day feels heavy. I thought I could handle being alone, but the truth is, it's so much harder than I ever imagined. The truth is, not having my husband around, anytime I look around and roll on the bed, is devastated, and I find myself wishing for the little things he used to do, those simple comforts that I took for granted. I used to roll my eyes when he would try to cuddle or when he wanted to talk about our day. Now, those moments feel like a warm hug I desperately miss. I never realized how much his presence meant to me until it was gone. I used to push him away when all he wanted was to be close. Now I long for those times, wishing I could turn back the clock and appreciate him the way he deserved. Every night, I sit in the dark and feel the heaviness of my regrets. I pray for his comfort, for his smile, and for the love that we once shared. I never thought I would miss the things I rejected so much. It's hard to face the truth. I just need him to come and tell me that we'll be okay. But I have to face reality, which is that he's gone and that he's never coming back. I realize now how much I need him. I didn't see it before, but he was my everything. I wish I could find a way to tell him how sorry I am and how much I want him back. Life feels so tough without him, and I can't help but feel like I've lost the best part of myself. He has cut communication with me totally since after the divorce, so I know there's no way. Looking back, I don't even know if it was really about my husband being busy or if I was just struggling to deal with my own loneliness and insecurities. Maybe I was looking for validation outside because I hadn't figured out how to ask for it from the one person who truly mattered. Now, as I sit here with nothing left but regrets, I realize how foolish I was. I let a temporary feeling destroy something permanent. I traded real love for a fleeting sense of attention, and it cost me everything. Every day is an uphill battle, a battle I am fighting so hard to survive every day. But all I got is wounds and damages, and it's getting harder to survive it. I've heard people say that time heals all wounds, but I can't help but wonder how long it will take for me to find peace again. The guilt weighs me down, and every moment I spend alone finds a way to show me how stupid I was together with my mistakes flashing before me with regrets. I can't help but think of how I lost someone who meant the world to me over a moment of weakness. I am really trying my best to navigate this new reality and to hold on to the hope that one day I can forgive myself. And for those of you that are quick to judge and criticize me for what I did and telling me I deserve everything and that I brought this on myself, I want to shout back that I know I made a mistake. I know I messed up, and I'll never do it again. I get it. I see your anger, and I understand why you feel that way. But I'm living with this pain every single day, and I don't need your hate piling on top of it. I'm trying to learn from this to be a better person, and all I need is time to heal. So to those who are hating me, please move on. I'm already carrying the burdens of my mistakes, and I'm trying to figure out how to live with them. I'm trying to piece my life back together and to forgive myself for the hurt I caused. Yes, I messed up, but I'm committed to doing better, and I won't let this define me forever. Thank you all for reading this and for being here with me through this heartbreak. I'm working on picking up the pieces one day at a time. I hope one day I can share a brighter chapter of my life with you all or with the people around me.